Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. At Bet365, Andrew DiCecco from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com Eagles beat reporter. He joins us for today's edition of Football at 4. He's got a lot of great off-season content up right now, including one thing I really wanted to get into today. He actually wrote about it this morning. Some of the most improved candidates. He has them up at InsideTheBirds.com and some other great conversational pieces over there now as we bring in Andrew DiCecco for today's edition of Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live. AD, what's up, my man?
Hey, Mike, I'm doing great. Hope you are as well.
As always, good to catch up with you, and a good piece over at InsideTheBirds.com. And, we talk a little bit, one of the questions we had on for Motion, the mailbag, was about who the number 3 wide receiver, the clear guy is. You wrote about Dotson, and I really wanted to kind of pick your brain on him. You have him as a guy that you think could be an offensive breakout type of player, or at least an improved candidate from last year. I wanted to get your thoughts on how getting traded for when he did impacted his production and what being here for the whole season now could do for him this season.
Yeah, I think that was the primary hindrance, right? Because he didn't suddenly have his skills eroded when he got to Philadelphia. I don't think enough was made, Mike, about, and this isn't just for Jahan Dotson, but for any player that's really put in that situation, about how difficult it is, especially when you land with a new team 2 weeks before the season starts, when you spent all of the offseason and training camp learning an entirely different system. You have to get continuity with your quarterback. You have to figure out the ways that this offensive coordinator wants things to be done. And before you know it, they had to go to Brazil and play that first game. And it never quite looked like Dotson was comfortable, nor did it seem like Jalen Hurts was overly infatuated with getting him the football. A lot of that probably has to do with, not having that continuity and having those reps together in the offseason. But then you started to see later in the season, he made some big plays. The 27-yarder, obviously, in the Super Bowl that was originally believed to be a touchdown. He had the touchdown in the playoffs as well a couple of weeks prior against the Packers. So I'm thinking that he can possibly build off of this success that he had late in the season, and now he has the luxury of having the full off season where you're able to get those reps and those throwing sessions in with the quarterback. And I'm curious also to see how Kevin Patullo chooses to utilize him, because if you look at it, I think he just had like 11.4 yards per reception. Jahan Dotson has a lot to offer after the catch, getting him the ball in space. I didn't think a lot of the routes that he was asked to run were really taking advantage of his skill set. So maybe you might see some different utilization for Jahan Dotson this year. Look, I'm not suggesting that he's going to overtake A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, or Dallas Goedert in the pecking order. That would be silly, but I certainly think he can do more than 19 receptions on 33 targets for 216 yards.
Yeah, I was going to say, follow up with Dotson, and people got excited about him. I think, he was a first-round pick. He was a guy who went to Penn State. People knew who he was. What are some of the things he does well that had people excited?
Well, and first and foremost, he's primarily an outside receiver, so he was aligning inside, which doesn't necessarily cater to what he's good at. Obviously, the goal is to get your best 3 receivers on the field when you're not utilizing both tight ends, but he's really good after the catch. I thought that when he was in his rookie season in particular, he was good at going up and getting the football. He didn't seem to have any sort of reluctance. When the ball was in the air, it was his. And I think he's probably more of a number 2 receiver, maybe even a number 3 receiver on a really good team, but he does have a lot more to offer, especially when you look at some of the plays, there was lack thereof, that were down the field for the Eagles last season. I think he has that ability to really be a vertical slot and open things up for the Eagles offensively.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, Dotson, Jahan Dotson, and you got Terrace Marshall, another guy that they signed this offseason. Adam and I were talking about him the other day about, when he was in the draft class, he had played in college with a ton of talented guys. Adding him there, I guess, should at least push Dotson to let them know, hey, we brought in a little competition for you too.
Yeah, I'll be the first to raise my hand and say I never want to make too much. I never make too much off of those signings that are late in the process. If a player hasn't really found his footing at multiple stops and they were a higher draft pick, I'm always more along the lines of a wait-and-see type of evaluator. That's sort of what I've learned throughout my career. But what I will say is what the information that we have to go off of is OTAs and that one mandatory mini camp practice that we attended as the media. And what I will say is you could see the confidence already there from Jalen Hurts in finding ways to get him the football. He's a bigger body wide receiver. He can shield off defenders. And if they don't get what they're looking for from Johnny Wilson this summer, that's a spot where Terrace Marshall can really fulfill that type of role, doing the dirty work and freeing other players up for big plays. But I think the key here is that he got to the Eagles much earlier than someone like Jahan Dotson did last year. So he's able to kind of absorb the offense. And so when you get to training camp, there's not that acclimation period. You're already on the same page as those other quarterbacks.
How much, we're talking with Andrew DiCecco for Football 4 today. How big of a role, Andrew, do you see Kevin Petula having in kind of unlocking? He's a pass game guy. He's been a guy who's been a receiver coach, pass game coordinator. Do you think that there is now more of an opportunity because Petula will be calling the plays?
I think so. And you might get some pushback on that because they're going to say this is the same coach who oversaw a very staggering, lethargic passing attack last season and even the year before. But the reality is sometimes you're able to see things through a different lens. And, yeah, maybe you kind of go back to the drawing board. Okay, here's what worked. Here's what didn't work. This is what I can do to put someone like maybe a Jahan Dotson in a better position to be successful. Here's how we can better take advantage of AJ and Devontae. How about the middle of the field? We didn't use that enough. Maybe we can tap into that. And now he has full control over that. And I really do believe that you're going to see him find ways to expand the passing game, to add some new wrinkles to it, and really take full advantage of the gamut of pass catchers that they have.
Now, here's kind of a question you might not be able to answer in terms of specifics, but maybe just a ballpark here. He played 58% of the snaps last year. What's kind of an ideal share for him to make an impact? And whose catches does he cut into? That's where it's hard for Dotson to make a big impact, numerically anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that 58 to 60 range is kind of what I was expecting. However, a lot of times it just seemed like he was running routes and getting his steps in and his cardio. And this year, I think you're going to see a player that is running routes with a purpose and has that belief that the ball is going to come his way, and the quarterback is going to have a lot more confidence in throwing the ball his way because they're on the same page. There's not that guesswork or that feeling out stage. But realistically, I don't know if he's going to. Now, can I see him maybe getting 25 catches? Sure, that would be an improvement. Can he work down the field and have force defenses to play the Eagles a little bit differently over the top? Absolutely, that would be an improvement. Making plays in space, another improvement there. But, I mean, even the year before, I know I'm going to mention a name that's not very popular in Quez Watkins, but he only had 15 catches as well. It's very difficult to facilitate the ball to all of your playmakers without shortchanging your marquee ones like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. But if I had to guess, maybe Devontae might see fewer targets because I think that Dallas Goedert is going to have, and we say this every year, but I really do believe it, one of those seasons that we look back on and say we finally got the one that we were all forecasting.
You also, I know from last week in the mailbag, who's going to have a bigger year, Barkley or A.J. Brown. You did not hesitate with your answer of A.J. Brown on that one. Let's go to defense, where you highlight Jalix Hunt as a breakout candidate, and I think it's either him or Nolan Smith that you're either buying into one or both. There's a lot of hype around him. Is it, Vic Fangio, obviously, Jeremiah Washburn, don't forget him as well, working with Jalix Hunt here. Is it too much to think that he could step in, replace, and exceed what you got from Josh Sweat, or is that what the Eagles are hoping for?
I don't think it's too much to ask, Mike, and the reason why I say that is Jalix has more juice than someone like a Josh Sweat. Jalix has, in a year's time, gone from being a player who many were on the fence about, that thought the Eagles reached for in the third round, which was absolutely incorrect, to a player now who is going to have the opportunity to start. But moreover, by midseason, he was the third edge rusher, and I thought it was interesting that Vic Fangio didn't feel the need to lean on a Charles Harris, a veteran player who was on the practice squad. Instead, he was okay with what Jalix Hunt was giving them. But I also think that there's another element to this, and it's run defense, being able to set the edge. And he was a willing participant in run defense, which you don't often see for players who are sort of learning that position and maybe haven't quite grown into their body. And I really do think that he can give you 8 or 9 sacks and be much more of a consistent player week in and week out than Josh Sweat is, just because you've seen it. When he's on the field, there wasn't a play or there wasn't a game that went by where you can't highlight a play where he was running to the football with urgency, making a play against the run, finding ways to displace offensive linemen. One thing that I liked about Josh Sweat was obviously how he finished last season strong, but there were way too many times over the years where Josh Sweat has gone radio silent for an extended period of time. I don't think Jalen Hunt's that kind of player.
You got Tim and Nolan Smith, both young players. Are they taking a risk going this young, or is this just kind of the evolution of the position at this point where they are?
Well, everything the Eagles have done this offseason is to make sure that the roster is built for sustained success and build around its young nucleus. And that all the good teams tend to, you have these homegrown talents. And sometimes you have to get those startup costs out of the way. And the Eagles did that over the past couple of years. And now it is their time to go and take advantage of the opportunity. It's kind of the way that it goes in the NFL. And you can't pay everybody. There's so much money tied into this Eagles offense that eventually that pendulum's going to swing, and they're going to have to spend and to keep a lot of these players in-house, like your Quinyon Mitchells and Cooper DeJeans and Nolan Smiths, Jalen Carter and Reed Blankenship. So eventually they're going to have to lock these guys in to make sure that they're able to ensure that success. But it's just kind of the way that it goes when you're trying to build a team to not only be impactful for 1 year, but also be a force for years to come.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, read that full article on his breakout players over at InsideTheBirds.com. You have another piece about the corners, Ringo, Jackson. It seems to be a battle. It's not going to be Jair Alexander. He signed with Baltimore yesterday, so those two guys are in the clear of them bringing in an established player at that position. And as we know, most people think Ringo has the inside track on that job. Do you think he is ready for a starting role in this third season now?
I think that it's now or never, and I think that he has all the ability to be able to make that leap forward, and he's going to be given every opportunity to win this job. Look, this is a player going into his third season. You like the length, you like the athleticism. Now it becomes, are you a consistent enough player for Vic Fangio to trust you? Are you assignment sound? Are you a highly volatile player, a high variance type of player where on a given play, it's feast or famine, like maybe a Sidney Brown has proven to be in his past? But what I will say about Ringo is that he talked about this offseason about honing in on his technique. That has to be music to the ears to his coaches, especially Vic Fangio, because it hasn't been the athleticism. Where he has had some of those hang-ups, it's been with technique, being too handsy, being a little bit too grabby, to the point where you didn't really see him on the field, and eventually Isaiah Rodgers leapfrogged him. But what I will say to all of that none of that matters anymore. This is a new season. Players grow and develop, and now Ringo is going to have this opportunity, and he is, to make no mistake, he is the clear front runner to win this job. But Adoree Jackson, he's seen it all, Mike, and he's going to have something to say about it. But this is one of those battles that I am most fascinated to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Jackson was kind of, I would imagine he was just kind of brought here as like a safety valve just in case. But you look at it, like for Ringo, is this the Eagles hoping that potential finally meets opportunity? Because this is a guy who has a track record going back to Georgia, right? I mean, he was maybe one of the most athletic, intriguing prospects in that draft. And, obviously he comes to Philadelphia and he just hasn't played all that. Does his potential finally meet this opportunity? That will be one of the big stories here. And then Ringo, Fangio emphasized that Ringo, needs the reps. Sometimes you just need to play. Sometimes you don't show what you could do in practice settings, right? I mean, sometimes you just need to get out in the field. But what do you think Ringo has, how he has, presented himself when he has been out on the field?
Really, really confident, Mike, and especially it's in OTAs, and he was a standout in OTAs last year, and that doesn't always translate to having a successful training camp. But what I will say is you look for certain traits, for one, but you also look to see how they acquit themselves going against some more of the preeminent players on the roster. And what I mean by that is lining up opposite A.J. Brown. There wasn't a moment, there wasn't a snap or a play that I can ever think of Ringo backing down from the challenge or looking like he wasn't up for that challenge. He was run step for step in phase with A.J. and competing throughout the catch. And he got his hands in there for a couple of breakups on the final practice that we were there for. he's a confident player, and I think sometimes it takes a little bit longer for the light to come on. We often talk about his youth, but I think right now he has the goods to go out there this summer and really nail down a starting spot.
So let's bring up Adoree Jackson real quick. He is a veteran player, but how much of a threat is he to win the job? I mean, sometimes we're just like, well, they want Ringo to win it. You know, Ringo's the better athlete. He has got more potential. But how much is a threat is Adoree Jackson? Is he just like, hey, the veteran break glass in case of emergency, or is he a guy that still has some? You know, this guy was a first-round pick too.
Yeah, no, the competition's absolutely legitimate. They're not just going to hand Kelee Ringo the job. And Adoree Jackson working in his favor, yeah, he is a little bit of an older player, but there hasn't been that steep decline in terms of his speed, which he was known for when he came out of USC. He is somebody who can play outside, obviously, but also inside, and he's played in 90-plus games in the NFL level, so there's not a lot that teams can throw at him that he hasn't seen. He doesn't have the same upside. He only has 4 career interceptions, and if you can believe that. He doesn't have the upside of a Ringo, but he is somebody that if Vic Fangio, I mean, we know that he prioritizes steady players that don't necessarily go out there and it's not an EKG, then that's something that you know, he could feasibly work his way into that starting conversation. But if Ringo puts it all together, and there's no reason right now to suggest that he won't, that job's going to go to him because he's a player that has been in this system for 3 years now. They've drafted, they have more invested in him, and he does offer more upside.
Yeah, you know, he's got the upside going for him. You got a guy like Adoree Jackson, sound assignment play football. Could be a guy that, you know, maybe Vic Fangio feels a little bit more comfortable with. We'll see. Maybe Adoree starts, has a shorter lease, and then Ringo takes over. Or if Ringo starts, is there a short lease there knowing that, hey, I got a guy waiting in there that knows what he's doing? That will be a very interesting storyline, how that whole thing, I know that's one that you're really looking at. You wrote about it over at InsideTheBirds.com. One other thing that Andrew wrote about that really good piece, because I love the competition that Ojulari and Josh Uche bring to the table here. And we talked about Hunt, the young guys, Smith, the young guy, but how big of an impact are having these two guys at training camp? They might both make the team, maybe only one, but having both of those guys there to push those young guys.
Well, it's incredibly important, especially when you look at the depth behind Nolan Smith and Jaywick Hunt, and really beyond Ojulari and Anuche. Both of those players have questions, and we'll get to that in a second. But after that, Mike, it's just Patrick Johnson, who's more of a special teams player, Antoine Powell-Ryland, who the Eagles drafted, and probably have some degrees of expectations, but maybe not quite yet. And then you have O'Shawn Mathis and KJ Henry, who were holdovers from last season. They were on the practice squad. So they really need probably both players, but certainly Ojulari, who offers a little bit more juice as a pass rusher, 22 career sacks, 25 years old. There was one season where he played over 700 snaps, and that was where he had the most availability. I don't think there's a coincidence there, but he's somebody that has played a lot of football when he's been available, and I think he offers a little bit more. He's less of a one-dimensional player than Anuche, so he would be the third edge rusher, in my opinion. And Uche's gotten some compliments from Fangio, from Lane Johnson, so that's a player that maybe this system really caters to what he does well, and he might be able to tap into the player that he was in 2022. We have no real way of knowing until we get to training camp and the pads come on, but it's very important, Mike, to answer your question, that both players are really sort of round into form and give the Eagles that depth that they really need at that edge position.
Yeah, Ojulari was a second-round pick of the Giants, another Georgia guy, a lot of injuries. He's played just 46 games since being drafted in 2021. I like of those two, I find him to be the more intriguing one. How about you?
Yeah, Ojulari is my most impactful free agent addition, at least right now. That was my pick, just because you see the youth, you know, he's reuniting with a lot of his former teammates, and perhaps he's somebody that will just thrive in a change of scenery, in a winning organization with a place that knows how to really get the most in terms of health from their players. They have good practices with the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think that in this system, he should be able to thrive. And you'd be hard-pressed, Mike, to find a better third edge rusher, at least one with more upside than Ojulari.
All right, check out all of Andrew's coverage of the Eagle offseason. By the way, a 1 month from Sunday is the opening of Eagles training camp. All right, my man. We will catch up.
Can you hear the excitement in my voice?
You sound pepped up, man. You sound like you're ready
man,
for this
definitely.
thing to go. By the way, our division previews will start on July the 10th. Well, we will rip through the AFC all the way up to the NFC East, and that will lead us up to Eagles and Cowboys on September the 4th. Andrew DiCecco, InsideTheBirds.com. Football at 4. Thanks, man.
You bet, Mike. Take care.
There's Andrew, everybody, here on the Sports Bash. And, of course, you can check out Andrew's coverage of the Eagles over at InsideTheBirds.com. Football at 4 every day right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.